Welcome back, Capital F football fans, to the O&O Sports YouTube channel. Today, we are continuing my season previews. If you have not seen my other season previews, there's going to be a playlist that gets linked, over here somewhere. We've covered the likes of Indiana, we've covered Alabama, we've covered Texas, Michigan, but don't click off just yet because today we have none other than the Louisiana State University Tigers, also more formally known as LSU. One of the most polarizing teams in the sport for this upcoming season because, of course, in 2025, they go 7-6, fire their former head coach Brian Kelly, and they bring in Lane Kiffin. A lot of drama surrounding that addition, but we're going to keep it strictly to on-the-field predictions for this video, at least for the most part. And without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into what LSU is losing coming into this season. They, of course, lose their starting quarterback, Garrett Nussmeier, who I was very high on going into 2025. Didn't end up panning out. You could argue a few different reasons why that might have happened, but overall, it was just a big letdown of a season. I still think mechanically Nussmeier was probably pretty good last year. He ended up getting drafted, but definitely not my best prediction of all time. They also lose their top three wide receivers, though, in Barrion Brown, Xavier Thomas, and Aaron Anderson. On the defensive side of the ball, they lose their top four backfield disruptors in linebacker Harold Perkins Jr., West Weeks, defensive lineman Jack Pyburn, and Patrick Payton, as well as their two top draft picks last year in AJ Halsey, the safety, and Mansour Delane. So there is a good amount of production being lost, especially on that defensive side of the ball. Losing that type of talent, especially on the front seven, is going to hurt any team, but maybe this team just a little bit less. I'll get into that in a second. For now, let's talk about what LSU retains, and that includes 87% of their snaps on offensive line, which per punt and rally is 21st in the country, so a lot to look forward to on the offensive line. They also return their top two running backs from last year in Harlem Berry and Caden Durham. And if you know anything about LSU the past few years, those guys have gone untapped. They could explode and be an elite duo next year just because of how underdeveloped, how underutilized they were under Brian Kelly in the LSU offense the past couple seasons. And they returned Trey'Dez Green, who's arguably the top returning tight end in the country. Last season went for over 30 receptions, over 400 yards with 7 touchdowns at the tight end position. That's going to get you looks as the potential top returning player at that position any given year. And despite all the staffing changes they made this year, they retain their defensive coordinator Blake Baker, who of course comes from Missouri a couple years ago. He was definitely the saving grace of this LSU team last year. Fielded a borderline, if not just flat out elite defense in 2025, but the offense just did not match. The play calling just did not match. So it is absolutely huge that Lane Kiffin was able to retain him. They also return one of the Weeks brothers, Whit Weeks, as well as defensive backs and DJ Pickett, Tamarcus Cooley, PJ Woodland, and Deshaun Spears for this upcoming season. A lot of returning talent in that secondary. And now for the fun part. What does LSU add this year? Of course, we talked about Lane Kiffin. He also brings his offensive coordinator from Ole Miss in Charlie Weiss Jr., as well as one of the most sought-after quarterback transfer portal prospects in Sam Leavitt. Now, I have questions personally about Sam Leavitt's arm. I don't think he is bad at passing the ball, but I definitely think his strength is more at being a playmaker, using his legs, improvising, and extending plays rather than just his pure arm talent. And protecting Sam Leavitt, they bring in the number one player, I believe, overall in the transfer portal class this year in offensive tackle Jordan Seaton, as well as Aliou Ball, I believe, from Georgia as an interior offensive lineman there. They also bring in Dylan Jones to strengthen that already untapped running back room that I think could be very, very good this year. And then they just bring in an absolute haul at wide receiver to help Sam Leavitt. They bring in Winston Watkins from Ole Miss, Jace Brown, I believe Kansas State, Eugene Wilson, Florida, Jackson Harris, and Trey Brown. So a pretty massive overhaul at wide receiver, if that's not already obvious. I think that could be one of the deepest rooms overall in the country now with Charlie Weiss Jr. I think it could be one of the best as well, just looking back to how Ole Miss was, how they spread the ball around. Had at least 5 receivers, I believe, that got consistent targets last year. So they're going to be deep once again. It's going to be one of the strengths of this team. But on the defensive side of the ball, they bring in another elite transfer portal prospect in Prince Will Uman Mielen from Ole Miss. They bring in Stefylan Green at defensive tackle from Clemson. They also bring in TJ Daugherty at linebacker. They bring in defensive back Ty Benefield to strengthen that secondary even more than it already is. And one of the most underrated pickups for this LSU team is their kicker, Scott Starzik, I believe it's pronounced, was an absolutely elite at kicker, but having a reliable kicker is going to help you more than it will hurt you, so definitely a plus there. Overall, I believe they did improve as a roster. I think with what they brought in, with the stabbing hires they've made, they're absolutely going to be better than they were last year, but we'll get more into those predictions in a second. For now, let's take a look at LSU's schedule this season. At home, they face Clemson, Louisiana Tech, Texas A&M, McNeese, Mississippi State, Alabama, and Texas, and on the road, Ole Miss, Kentucky, Auburn, Tennessee, and Arkansas. And that's a pretty favorable split. They get 7 home games to 5 away games. They get one of the tougher starts to the season that I've seen in facing Clemson, Louisiana Tech at Ole Miss, which is going to be an electric game because that's where Lane Kiffin comes from. There was the rocky exit there from Ole Miss, so that's going to be an absolute gem of a game. And then they follow that up with Texas A&M at home. 3 home games in that, so it's not the worst of the worst, but facing Clemson at Ole Miss, Texas A&M in your first 4 games isn't necessarily the most favorable start to the Lane Kiffin era, so it's going to be a big test there. And on top of that, they also finished the season pretty difficult. Their November slate is Alabama at home, Texas at home, at Tennessee, and at Arkansas. So once again, 2 home games. At Tennessee is going to be the biggest swing there. Obviously, Texas is huge, but having that game at home is going to be very, very favorable to LSU. Obviously, same goes for Alabama. And it's also important to note that those 4 games come off a bye, so they get rested right before that stretch. But I think Tennessee is the biggest swing game there because it comes after Alabama and Texas at home. I know Alabama and Texas are probably going to be better overall than Tennessee, but at Tennessee, after that stretch, it's going to be a big, big upset watch, I believe, there. And the biggest thing for LSU in year 1 is with the portal overhaul, with the new roster, with the new coaching staff, can they withstand this grind like they did at Ole Miss? At Ole Miss, they were able to build that roster up, get it ready for that grind, and then make their push for the playoff. LSU already has more talent than Ole Miss, so it's not unlikely, but making that push in year 1, withstanding the grind of an SEC schedule in year 1 at any program is going to be very, very tough. So that is going to be the biggest question mark, going to be the biggest note for Lane Kiffin and the staff in year 1. And with all that great stuff out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the meat and potatoes of this video, the predictions for the LSU Tigers in 2026. But first, let's take a look at some of the odds for LSU in 2026. To win the SEC, FanDuel has them set to plus 850. So a long shot prediction just by the odds, but they're actually only the 4th SEC team in terms of how likely it is to happen according to FanDuel. So not out of the realm of possibility, although not super likely, but to make the CFP, they are plus 150. Very, very close. 11th overall, which means there's 12 teams there. I would say it's probably an okay play there at plus 150. It's still plus odds, but I mean, they're super talented. I believe that offense is probably going to be one of the best in the country, so not a terrible pick there. But in terms of win total, FanDuel has it set to 8.5, and they have the over at minus 110. So Vegas is likely going to have LSU capped out at around 9 wins, but I think their floor in 2026 is going to be 7-5, 5-4 in conference play. This would be a disaster scenario, obviously, with it being the floor. This would mean they lose 3 of their biggest 4 games. I think I have it at Ole Miss, Alabama, Texas, and Tennessee on the road. So that would be losing 3 or 4 of those games, as well as 1 of 2 of Clemson, Texas A&M, at Kentucky, or at Auburn, which is honestly pretty realistic. I don't think there is a 0% chance this happens. I don't think it will happen, but that schedule is going to be very, very tough. There's plenty of opportunity for loss, but I think I have LSU safely above some of these teams. So I have their ceiling at 10-2, 7-2 in conference play. This would be them going 2 for 4 in those big 4 games that I just talked about and going undefeated elsewhere, obviously, which brings me to my prediction for LSU in 2026. And in making this, I realize I have a lot of teams hitting their ceiling. I think that was kind of unintentional, but I once again have LSU hitting that ceiling of 10-2, 7-2 in conference play. This might change before the start of the season, but for now, I do have them in that 10-win threshold, finishing 3rd in the SEC. But the main reason I don't think their ceiling is higher, why I won't predict them higher, is because that schedule is just brutal. I think there's at least 2 losses baked in there. I might personally bring it to 3 before the start of the season, but for now, I have them winning 10 games. And I think if they're going to reach their ceiling, it's definitely going to be a matter of the defense stepping up once again, matching up with what should be a pretty solid offense. Like I said, I think the college football playoff is a very realistic scenario for LSU in year one. I'm not sure if I'll quite have them there. I think at 10-2, they would be in. But like I said, I'm up and down on this team. It is very hard to pinpoint them going into the season. But for now, that is what I think of the LSU Tigers. And let me know what you think of LSU in the comments down below. Do you think they're massively overrated, a 7-5 football team? Or do you think they could go on to win it all? I want to hear what you have to say. And while you're down there, drop a like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. With that being said, thank you for watching. Once again, be sure to tune in to the rest of the season previews that I have gone over if you want to get up to date on the biggest names in college football. And be sure to tune in next week for the next one, and I will see you there.